Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
Mr. Keiser, good to have you on with us.
Alex Jones.
Okay, Max Keiser, so much is going on. Now, let's talk about the G20. They're trying to push for a new global monetary bank. The same bankers that engineered the crisis, they're going to save us by giving them more power.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, before we get to the G20, I thought I'd review for you the orchestration of the biggest wealth heist in history. Okay, you ready for this? In 2 or 3 minutes, I will relate to you about how the biggest wealth heist in history took place. Are you ready for this?
Go.
Basically, going back to the 9/11 attacks, at that moment, Alex, the rich people in America got really frightened because their notion was, oh, my God, the barbarians are here. What are we going to do? And Alan Greenspan at the Federal Reserve Bank at the time, he took interest rates down to 1%. Now, interest rates are the fulcrum upon which the entire U.S. economy and the global economy functions. Low rates versus high rates. This is the tension that we've seen in America going all the way back to, you could say when they introduced the Federal Reserve back in the 1913 era. But it's interest rates that are the key. Now, when Greenspan lowered interest rates down to 1% after the attacks of 9/11, at the behest of what you might call the elites in America, because when you have low interest rates like that, you can engineer incredible banking frauds and heists. And what we've seen since that time is the banking system first accumulate hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars, of what we now call, or now what we now know are counterfeit bonds, stocks, and options, to the point where even Gordon Brown at the G20 meeting referred to this whole system as the shadow banking system. There is no doubt now, there is nobody hiding the fact that there is this huge shadow banking system. That's at least 20 or 30 trillion dollars worth of trades that go on behind the scenes, are totally unreported. This is why, Alex, when Geithner and these guys dump 5, 10, 12 trillion dollars into these banks, it doesn't seem to improve the situation at all, because they're sitting on 20, 30, 40 trillion dollars of fraudulent trades. And this has all been building up since the 9/11 attacks. They artificially dropped interest rates down to 1%, which set in motion the dot-com bubble, when then that burst. But instead of there being a recession, it merely went into the real estate bubble. That built up to extraordinary levels. When that burst, now they're faced with how are we going to create a new bubble, and the new bubble is what we talked about at the G20. It's Gordon Brown. He's talking about the IMF. He's talking about a global currency, and this is how they're going to try to hide this 20 or 30 trillion or more in bogus counterfeit bonds and stocks by using now the IMF. The IMF is not going to be the new global slush fund of choice, and that's what we're seeing today. What does it mean to people on the street, to average Americans? It means that they're not going to have money to borrow. It means the recession is going to get deeper. It means there's a depression coming, and it means that the bankers who have been basically using the system to confiscate all of this wealth are just getting better at it, and they're not about to turn around and start sharing that wealth and what they would do if they were really interested in doing that is that they would raise interest rates, because higher interest rates are what you and me and the saver want. We want a return on our investment. We want a return on the money we have in the bank. We want a wage that makes sense. That's tied into a higher rate. As long as they keep rates artificially low, they can continue to put forth these are incredible accounting frauds. And it was just
Max Keiser, just to simplify it for people, Bloomberg now reports $12.8 trillion has disappeared in 6 months since October 3rd into a black hole. Senators and House members asked the Fed chief, where's the money? He says, I won't tell you. Meanwhile, they're still giving each other record bonuses. Rome is beginning to burn. 630-something thousand people unemployed in March alone, accelerating. All of this is just getting crazier and crazier. Meanwhile, the very banking institutions that engaged in this Ponzi scheme, this counterfeiting fraud, as you rightfully put it, are running around smiling at the G20, saying that they're saving us. I mean, where does all this go? I mean, how...
The black hole, or the shadow banking system, is still quite several magnitudes greater than this 11 to 12 trillion dollars that they've already dumped into the system. And we're talking about multiple hundreds of trillions of dollars. And because that it's a shell game. So they, as you know, Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan stopped being investment banks. They became commercial banks. That allowed them to be eligible for bailout money from the Feds. Then they bought a dying institution like Merrill Lynch, was bought by Bank of America, so they can get money from the Fed to bail them out. Merrill Lynch is still sitting on a huge multi-trillion black hole of debt. J.P. Morgan alone has $90 trillion worth of derivative contracts, and they won't tell you where they are or who the counterparty is. You know, that's another phrase you hear all the time. Oh, the counterparty. Are they at risk or not at risk? Well, the ultimate counterparty is you and me. We're the counterparty.
And let's be clear.
Let's be clear. No counterparty. Well, we're the counterparty ultimately at the end of the game. And how do they do that? Well, the end game is, as many people on your show have pointed out, massive money printing, high inflation, hyperinflation. So that's really when the true crisis begins. So when Obama says that, well, you know, we're learning our lessons now, and we don't want to repeat this crisis, we haven't even started the real crisis yet. The real crisis is when all this money finds its way into the general economy in the form of hyperinflation. The U.S. policies right now are the policies not of the 30s that they're trying to avoid, but of Weimar Republic of the 20s. Weimar Republic, to recover from World War I, introduced lower rates, high money supply, and basically the same policies that the U.S. are doing now. The result was hyperinflation in Weimar Germany. History tells us this. This is what is going to happen in the U.S. because they're doing the exact same policies.
Now, Max Keiser, expanding on that, and you've been making these predictions for years, and now, unfortunately, they're coming true. 5 years ago, you were criticizing the derivative situation and calling it a Ponzi scheme. Now we're at that point. $12.8 trillion they expect U.S. taxpayers to pay back to offshore banks. And then, in a weird way, the central banks then get paid interest on allowing the government to loan money to the very banks. So they're going to get interest on the money we basically give them and then charge us interest. And the GDP is $13 trillion of the United States, and all these other countries are getting close to exceeding their GDPs in only 6 months of looting. So, A, how would we ever pay back to the foreign banks? We have to pay them back for giving them our money. Get your mind around that, folks. Will we be able to ever pay them back with 1 million new taxes? And then, B, how bad will the hyperinflation crises get, and when is that coming?
Well, the interest that Americans, on average, pay in the percentage of their income that goes to servicing the debt is I believe in the 14 to 15%. I'll double-check my figures. I know that it's up quite sharply in the last year and a half. And the trajectory of that number is going up quite quickly. So when the income of you and me and every American, when it gets to the point where you're putting 50 or 60 or 70% of your income to pay just the interest on your debt, then you have what Warren Buffett himself predicted less than 3 years ago. Warren Buffett himself said America is becoming a nation of sharecroppers. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about indentured servitude, and it's being engineered because, you know, the rich people, you got to go all the way back to 1649, Alex. You know, in England, they revolted against the divine right of kings. Charles I was taken off the throne, and you had a parliamentary rule established, and it was the end of divine right of kings. Now we've got the divine right of hedge funds. The hedge funds think that they're God. They think Tim Geithner thinks he's God and that he farts money, and he wants everyone to breathe in his fart money and think that can sustain them. And let me give an example of something that's absolutely shocking. Just recently, the government went after UBS, Union Bank of Switzerland, and they said, you know what? We found you evading taxes and helping people to evade taxes. We're going to fine you $750 million. At the same time, AIG, through Geithner's plan, was getting a $5 billion cash injection from the U.S. taxpayer that went right into UBS's pocket. So the penalty that UBS had to pay for being caught in a tax evasion scam was to be gifted from the U.S. taxpayer $4.25 billion.
Well, Stay there, Max. I want to repeat that when we come back. Max Keiser is our guest, and we're going to continue breaking all this down and talk about the big issue. How about we just arrest the bankers?